Fox News is now streaming live on Fox One. When it matters most, turn to the voices you trust. We go beyond the headlines, bringing you the stories you won't hear anywhere else. Live coverage, sharp analysis, real perspective. At home or on the go, stay connected when it counts. Stream Fox News on Fox One. Download today.
Sunday morning. With us today is General David Petraeus, and United States Army 4-star general and CIA director, and one good friend, one smart guy. He knows the pulse of the situation. Well, General, what is your report to the American people?
Well, John, all eyes are on Pakistan right now, where the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is hosting our Vice President, J.D. Vance, and also Steve Witkoff and Jerry Kushner and others, the American negotiators, with the Iranian team, which is headed by the Parliament Speaker, Ghalibaf, to see what the settlement can be negotiated to bring the war in the Gulf to an end. And I think it's paradoxical at this point that the U.S. has done a magnificent job, our men and women in the military, in degrading Iran's war-making capacity and even its military-industrial capacity to make components and assemble missiles and drones and the rest. All of that very substantially degraded. But they might actually emerge, the Iranians could emerge strategically strengthened if this negotiation can't produce an outcome that restores the Strait of Hormuz to open waters, international waterway that can be transited without paying a tribute or a toll to the Iranians, which is the case right now. There is, I should note, an initiative by the U.S. Navy where a ship actually went through the main channel of the Strait into the Gulf and then came back out again to the Arabian Sea. And apparently there is an effort to ensure that any mines that might be floating around in the main channel are removed. But so the paradox is that, again, depending on the outcome of the negotiations, Iran could emerge much weakened militarily, but strengthened somewhat strategically because they can control some export of some 20% of the world's crude oil and 20% of the LNG, even though, yes, there are paths to get some of that out. Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea, the United Arab Emirates to a port in the Gulf of Oman, and so forth. So that's what everyone is watching now. And if that cannot be achieved, I think there is a possibility that the war resumes, and there is a very distinct focus on what would be required to try to wrest control of the Strait of Hormuz from Iran, which is a very challenging mission, given that it only takes a few mines or a couple of lucky drone shots or something like that to undermine the confidence that is necessary for the ships to begin moving again the way they have in the past. And keep in mind that this is not about risk insurance for those ships or underwriting that in some way. This is about the confidence by those who own the ships and those who own the cargo on those ships that they will not lose crew members, as has been the case. There have been some crew members lost already because of Iranian attacks in and around the Gulf.
And there's been reports also that the Lebanese prime minister is coming to New York today, Sunday, to meet with Israeli. Have you heard anything about that?
Yes, I have. Yeah, the original report that I heard was that there were going to be negotiations between the Lebanese ambassador to the U.S. and the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Apparently, that delegation is going to be beefed up by the prime minister. And, of course, you have a president in Lebanon as well, so this is the head of the parliament. If that's an accurate report. The bottom line, though, is that there is an effort ongoing by the Israelis to meet with and discuss with the Lebanese government really their desire, which is to get the Lebanese armed forces to disarm Hezbollah once and for all, at the very least to control the area between the northern border of Israel and the Litani River, which is some 20 to 40 kilometers or so north of it, depending on where you are. Israel really would like to continue the war against Hezbollah, frankly, and that's a problem as well, because Iran, by its control of the Strait of Hormuz, can actually influence events elsewhere outside the immediate neighborhood. In this case, Israel's continued campaign against Hezbollah by threatening to keep the strait closed, and that will put pressure on President Trump. And you've seen that President Trump asked Prime Minister Netanyahu to dial it back in Lebanon. At some point, it may be that they have to actually ask Israel to stop altogether, although Hezbollah continues to shoot missiles and rockets and drones and so forth into Israel itself. So keep in mind that this is not a negotiation with Hezbollah, Iran's proxy in southern Lebanon. This is a negotiation with the government. And let's recognize that the government doesn't really control Hezbollah. If it can have conversations with Hezbollah, and in the past there have been agreements fostered through this kind of arrangement. But the real objective here by Israel is to not just degrade Hezbollah even more than they already are, and keeping in mind what was done to them in the past as well, but really to try to have Hezbollah disarmed once and for all. And the use of force, the legal use of force in Lebanon rests with the government security forces, not with a militia supported by Iran. But that's a very, 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 very significant task. And I'm not sure that the Lebanese armed forces will feel capable of doing this. And of course, there's always the worry that they could plunge the country back into some kind of civil war, in this case, between the Sunni and Shia, and see where the Christians fall out on that as well.
So the negotiations are continuing in Pakistan. It's going to continue until tomorrow, you feel?
Yeah. I mean, the early reports is that these are ongoing, and we've yet to see any kind of indication. I suspect this is going to take some time. Again, the Iranians are really quite good at dragging out negotiations, at having the last word, the last edit, you name it. And historically, these kinds of negotiations have actually taken years, not just months, much less days or weeks. I suspect that there will be enough progress in the eyes of President Trump in the first couple of weeks to extend the negotiations, because keep in mind, this is a 2-week ceasefire right now, to extend that further. And then we're going to have to see how willing Iran is to negotiate on the 10 points that it put forward. Were laughable. The U.S. would leave the Middle East altogether. It would allow Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz, essentially turn it into its Panama Canal and charge tolls for it. We'd pay reparations. We'd lift the sanctions on Iran and the secondary sanctions on those who do business with Iran, and a variety of other, frankly, absurd demands that cannot be accepted by the U.S. And also the right to continue to enrich uranium, which, again, is also a non-starter. So we'll see what they're willing to negotiate, and then whether how resistant they are to being really flexible. And that's going to determine what happens at the end of the time, where you see whether they're really open to negotiation or not.
Well, General Petraeus, thank you for the update, and I guess we take it day by day, hour by hour, and see what happens.
We do, and if I could, John, I might just offer quickly that I just got back from Ukraine. It was my 10th trip since the full-on invasion. I got back at late Sunday night, and I have to say that I was quite heartened by what I saw. Not really on the front lines, because you can't go to the front lines. It's just too dangerous. Even the commanders can't go all the way forward to see their troops in the front lines. It's a death zone. But what I learned sitting in command posts of units with forces on the front lines, and then command posts of drone units that are carrying on the fight on the front line, because this is largely a fight of unmanned services with very limited numbers of operations on the ground involving humans. But it appears that with the onset of the good weather, so Russia can no longer attack given the cover of really foul winter weather, which is the only time that the ubiquitous surveillance is not perfect. It appears that they are able to halt the advance of the Russians, stopping them just about cold. And the price they pay is extraordinary. They're now losing and having seriously wounded more soldiers each month than it appears Russia is able to recruit. And that's a very important achievement. Keep in mind that the Russians have lost now around 1.35 million killed and wounded. And that is more than the U.S. military lost in all of World War II.
Wow.
So the casualties are enormous, especially on the Russian side. And so on the ground, on the front lines, there's real encouragement. At sea, the Russians still have their entire fleet tied up in a port as far from Ukraine as they can get. And Ukraine has now several times gotten into that port with drones. Drones either launched from maritime systems or long range or what have you. The continued problem for Ukraine is actually not intercepting Russian drones. They're doing that spectacularly well. Also, they have a tremendous common operational picture that is a product of very good acoustic sensors that are very effective against low-flying drones, and then radars that are very effective. And you put that together, and then they have very skilled pilots who are essentially dogfighting with these drones and try to take them from behind. Then they're taking out about 90% of the Russian drones that come at them on a given day. The challenge, though, is the missiles. And just as in the Gulf, there's just a limited number of missile interceptors. And they did get a shipment of them this past week when I was there, which was encouraging. And they get them, of course, from the Europeans, not just only the Americans. But that's the remaining challenge, really. And Russia continues to use missiles pretty effectively against Ukrainian infrastructure. During the winter, you'll recall they tried literally to turn off the lights and turn off the heat, and almost did that. Now that weather is much nicer, that's not the concern. Now it's just the other infrastructure that is critically important to Ukraine, including, again, this is very clearly civilian infrastructure, not that which just supports the military. But the overall skill of the Ukrainians, both in terms of operating systems and in terms of designing and manufacturing them at massive scale. They're going to produce 7 million drones this year alone, John, of all type. That's ground, it's air, it's also maritime. And again, we probably won't even approach 1 million, if that. So what they're doing is absolutely remarkable. And when the guns fall silent, this will be the arsenal of democracy for the Western world for a good period of time.
The new war, drones, and I guess the step after that, General, it sounds like it's going to be robots, just like Terminator 1.
Well, it'll be autonomous systems. In fact, you may recall I had a piece in Foreign Affairs magazine about 3 or 4 weeks ago that talked about the coming age of autonomous warfare. So right now, the limiting factor for drones is the number of pilots that you have. They're remotely piloted. But when you go algorithmically piloted, these systems become truly autonomous, and they execute the commands that have been translated into an algorithm, a program, all kinds of limits, tasks, etc. But then you can use drone swarms, and that'll be the next challenge that is out there. In fact, I have a piece that will come out, I think, in the Wall Street Journal in the next few days that talks about, look, our men and women did magnificently against Iran, but the real test case is what's going on in Ukraine. And we have not sufficiently learned from that yet all that we should. And we really need to go to school on that and to anticipate what is coming, which, again, is going to be autonomous systems. And then at some point, John, autonomous systems of systems, where it is fully autonomous from the sensors to the shooters, all guided, if you will, by what the commander has issued in terms of instructions, but which are then translated into algorithm. And that's how it all works. So there are a lot of challenges down the road, and we've really got to accelerate our response. I'm really heartened to see some of the items that are in the new defense appropriation request, because we really need to change how we do business, including with our procurement.
General, thank you so much, and thank you for everything you've done for America and continue to do for America. And let's talk again real soon.
Likewise, John. Thank you.
Thank you.